Hello and welcome to the One Life Church devotional series where we cover the entire Bible in 20 months. Well, today's chapters are Job 33 and 34, where Elihu, the youngest of Job's confidants, continues his monologue, his objection to Job and Job's friends' comments about Job's situation. And, he starts off by saying, listen, I too am made by God. I'm just a piece of clay, just like you, Job, but I'm also upright. And so you can trust what I've got to say. And then he says, there are three things basically that Job has said that he contests. The first one is, Job says in verse 9, I am pure, I've done no wrong, my hands are clean, and I'm free from sin. And he says, listen, in verse 10, yet God has found fault with me. You're not sinless, I'm not sinless. Now, while he's right with that, I'm not sure that Job did claim to be sinless. I think Job claimed to be better than everybody else. I think he said, look, why are they not being judged and I'm being judged? Anyway, that was the first thing he said. And then the second thing he says, he said, why do you complain to him that he responds to no one's words? For God does speak. Now, one way or another, though no one perceives it. And then he goes on to explain how God actually communicates with people. Now, I'm here on my morning walk. As you can see, I'm in a field. This is the farm next door to us. It's beautiful. I've got my dogs here with me today, and we're busy out there praying, and God speaks to me. This is where he's been speaking to me in recent times as I walk and I talk to him about things. This is where I'm challenged. But now Job says, God's not talking to me. And Elihu is basically saying, listen, my friend, God does talk. And he says, this is the one way he talks, verse 15, in visions in the night. I was actually not too far from here, about 4 km down that road with my wife on the 5th of September, the year before last, sitting on a blanket. And I said to my wife, babe, last night I had a dream, a very, very vivid dream. It was funny. It was Burt Reynolds. Remember, those of you old enough to remember the actor, he was pointing at me saying, it's time to go. I woke up thinking, oh, what was that? I don't often dream. But that same night, 2 other pastors that I trust deeply had dreams about me that said we were going to go and plant churches, and said I was going to go and I was going to leave, but not really leave. When I put those 3 dreams together, I really felt God was talking to me. Now, you can't live your life on dreams, but God does interrupt our dreams. He interrupted dreams of my friends to talk to them about me. God does do that. And he says in verse 19, he chastens people on their bed of pain. So in other words, sometimes things go wrong and God says, look, I'm trying to get your attention with that. It's not that God sends the pain, but he just allows you to experience it to get your attention. I mean, yesterday in the evening, I was drilling with a drill, and I was trying to fix something, and it just wasn't going right. And I just put it down, and I suddenly realized there were some relationships I needed to attend to before I got on to attend to my house. And it was just my priorities. It might not have been God speaking, but he used a uncooperative drill to sort me out last night. Now, and then he says this, and people will say, they will say, I have sinned. I perverted what is right, but I not get what I deserved. God does these things to a person twice, even 3 times, to turn them back from the pit in the light, that the light of life may shine on their face. It's like he's saying, don't you know God's nature? He's kind. He gives you a second chance. He gives people sometimes even a 3rd chance to realize that God's full of grace and he wants you to turn. That's what he's saying. And then the third thing he says, Job, you have said, verse 5 of the next chapter 34, I am innocent, but God denies me justice. He says, listen, man. He says, verse 9, for there's no profit in trying to please God. Verse 12, this is Elihu's retort. It is unthinkable that God would do wrong, that the Almighty would pervert justice. Verse 14, if it were his intention, and he withdrew his spirit and breath, all humanity would perish. He says, listen, all of us. It reminds me of a verse in Hebrews that says he sustains all things by his powerful word. Elihu's basically saying, if God really wanted to obliterate us, he would just lift his hand, and our universe would be gone. All this beauty. Do you know that the unrighteous and the righteous share it? The fact that we're not hit by a meteorite is God's prevenient grace. He's holding us. And this is what Elihu says. He says, listen, God does not favor the rich over the poor. And this is his conclusion. He says in verse 26, if he punishes people for their wickedness, who are we to say anything about that? If he remains silent when people are wicked, who are we to say anything about that? And so Elihu, in these 2 chapters, I think has some sense in what he says. Not too sure he represents Job accurately, though. Let's see what the reply is tomorrow.